mill our grains. We do all of our milling on site, on premise. The grist case is actually hand built.
Nice big grain
for
mill.
for the dimensions of the building, so we have to deal with our low ceilings. But we have our milling machine positioned right under it, so this is where we'll actually load an entire recipe into it the day before brewing, and then as the day of the brew, we'll actually mill the grain, so it's freshly milled as we're introducing it into the mash tun. So it's not sitting around oxidizing or, God forbid, getting damp at all.
Yeah, getting moldy.
Yeah, so we don't want that. I mean, down here we actually don't have moisture problems, luckily enough. It's actually fairly dry down here, probably due to our steam system. Yeah, so this is where we store all of our malts. All of our hops are kept refrigerated because the temperatures, I think, above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, your alpha acids and all of your flavor compounds and hops will start to deteriorate. So prior to actually adding them to the boil kettle, we'll make sure that they stay refrigerated so that they're fresh whenever they go. And we use pellet hops primarily just for ease of use, and they provide the same flavor as whole cone hops, but with about, I think, 25% the volume. So we can get away with using a lot less and still getting that really nice hop character out of it. Now, for dry hopping purposes, like in our Daddy Fat Sacks, we will dry hop with whole cone, whole leaf hops, just because they're a little bit easier to actually clean out of the beer, because when your pelletized hops are actually ground into very, very small flakes, and whenever you use them in the boil kettle, we can use whirl flock and zinc to actually kind of clump them together and have them drop out of suspension. But during dry hopping, we don't want all that floating around in the beer because that turns into a clarity nightmare.
Right.
So we dry hop, we use hop socks. It's an old school dry hopping method. We actually float 2 30-pound hop socks of hops in the beer for about a week and a half, 2 weeks to get the desired flavor. So they kind of bounce in there like ice cubes, and then we rack the beer off into kegs, and then we don't have to worry about actually filtering on any of the hop material.
So it's not cloudy.
And IPAs are notorious for being cloudy because of all the hop material, all the extra malt that goes into it to help balance out the bitterness. Our Daddy Fat Sacks is actually our biggest production beer we make. The mash volume is about 2,300 pounds, which is a little over 100 pounds of malt per barrel. So we had issues early on with chill haze proteins forming, which actually come from the mashing process, just one of the protein structures found in grain. And once we started using whirl flock and using gelatin in our cold side, we actually cleared up the chill haze, and then we had issues with hop particulate. So we started using double bag Muslim bags to store the hops in whenever we were dry hopping, and so we've actually eliminated most of the clarity issues with Daddy Fat Sacks. And we don't filter any of our beer.
And all your beers are unfiltered.
All our beers are unfiltered and unpasteurized as well.
Unpasteurized.
So they maintain all the stuff that's good for you.
So all bottle conditioned technically in a little bit?
Not necessarily. Bottle conditioning is whenever the beer actually re-ferments very slightly in the bottle, like beers like Francis Connor, Hoegaarden and stuff like that.
Certain
actually layers of yeast at the bottom. That comes from that tertiary fermentation of whenever you package the beer with still active yeast. And most homebrewers actually still do that. Where they'll use priming sugar, and that's bottle conditioning because you're actually allowing yeast to produce CO2 and a little bit of extra alcohol as well. But the alcohol volume is almost negligible, maybe 0.1%, maybe 0.2%. But the primary goal of bottle conditioning is just flavors from the yeast, which in Hoegaarden and like beers like Francis Connor, like your Hefeweizens, the yeast plays a very important part in providing flavors for the beer.
Okay.
We'll film this.
Here we go.
Hot liquor tank over there, which is used to heat up our water for the brewing process. We have our mash tun right there in the middle, which is where we actually use to extract the sugars, the flavors, the aromas from the malt. And then from the mash tun, it'll go then to the boil kettle, which we'll use then to boil the beer for 2 purposes. Sanitation is one of them, sterilization, killing off any bacteria that may be present from the water, from the air. And then during that process, we'll also add hops too, which we can do a number of things from bittering, aroma, and flavor. So at 60 minutes, we'll do a hop addition for bittering purposes, which most of our beers, since we're not a hoppy brewery, only have a 60-minute addition. But our triple hop Belgian triple, our Honest Ale, and our Daddy Fat Sacks all have 60-minute, 15-minute, and 10 or flame out hop additions for flavor and aroma. Typically at the 15 to 10-minute mark, you'll start getting more pronounced flavors and aromas from the hops than at the 60-minute mark. So at the 60-minute mark, you're extracting primarily the alpha acids, the lupulin, which attribute to the bitterness in the beer. You'll get some flavors at 60 minutes, like our best one we do at 60-minute edition, and we use Holler Tower Hirschbrucker hops, which give it a mild kind of piney citrus flavor. But it's not as noticeable as, say, with the P's and Q's, which are triple hop Belgian triple, where we use the Holler Tower, the Tettnang, and Czech saws, but we do 3 editions of them. So you get a much more pronounced hop character, hop flavor as well.
Okay.
And then, this is where fermentation and conditioning will take place. To my right is our bank of conical fermenters, and also behind me we have our 10-barrel conical fermenter. This is where primary fermentation will take place. This is where 95 to 99% of your alcohol will be produced. And the reason these vessels are shaped the way they are, with kind of the cylinder on top with the cone on the bottom, is due to whenever we crash cool the beer, all the yeast that was suspended in the beer actively fermenting when we crash cool makes the yeast go dormant, and it actually drops out of suspension and collects in the cone. And then we can actually rack the beer off the yeast bed into our conditioning tanks, leaving the yeast bed below the racking run. We can harvest it for later use, like if we want to, we'll use yeast up to about 5 generations. At that point, the yeast gets too stressed out, doesn't perform the way it wants, so then we'll discard it and get a new culture. But up to about 5 generations, it'll perform very strongly and won't be too stressed out.
So you can actually use yeast over and over and over again.
Exactly, and what we do whenever we rack it off, we'll actually put it in a yeast storage vessel and we'll feed it once a week with wort. Just basically sugar, no hops. So it'll keep it going, it'll keep it reproducing, keep the yeast happy. Then whenever we need to brew into it again, we'll actually pump it in to these tanks and kreuzen it, which is where we'll take about 2 barrels of wort from the previous beer that we've made and allow the yeast to multiply and get to the point where it has enough cells, which is I think right around, I want to say 1,000 billion cells that we need to actually do a 25-barrel batch of beer. And so that's what we do with our yeast then. And then over here, this is our bank of conditioning tanks. We have 3 vertical and 1 40-barrel horizontal tank, which we use primarily for lagering. But the purpose of conditioning the beer or aging it is to kind of take the more harsh flavors that are found in the beer, make them less noticeable, and take the more delicate flavors in the beer and make them more noticeable. So conditioning just brings balance and refinement to the overall product. And we cold condition all of our beers, including our ales. So our ales actually tend to finish a little bit like lagers due to that cold conditioning.
You actually lager your ales?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
We don't lager them as long now. Like our Gavra lager, which is our Oktoberfest, we actually lager for about, we like to do it a bare minimum of 4 weeks, and our last batch of Gavra we actually aged for 5 months.
Okay.
We did a true German lagering process on it, so it's a true medicine at this point. But beers like our best blonde, which is in this tank right here, we'll actually only cold condition for about a week, because it's a beer that's best fresh. You want all those nice vibrant flavors in it, because the best blonde being a Kolsch, it's going to have a lot of citrus flavors. It's going to have a lot of the lighter, crisper, almost crackery biscuit-like flavors, and it finishes with a very light touch of citrus from lemon zest. So we don't want to lager it. We don't actually want to condition those flavors out, but we still want to condition it to the point where the beer is clear, where it's clean, doesn't have any off flavors, any yeast flavors. So we'll only do about a week conditioning process on it. Now, a beer like Ludwig's Revenge, which is our German smoked lager, we'll lager for about 3 weeks to 4 weeks to help bring that smoky flavor more into balance, have it blend with the overall flavors. And since we use a lot of darker malts in it, those tend to have a little bit more of an astringency associated with them. We'll actually almost lager those astringent flavors out, so you taste the roasted chocolate, the roasted coffee taste, and then finish with the smoked bacon taste. So that's kind of the goal of conditioning, is to bring all your flavors to the forefront while eliminating kind of any off flavors that might be present with the yeast. And cold conditioning also brings clarity to the beer. You'll drop out a lot of your chill haze forming proteins, any dormant yeast that may still be in there, and that's actually pretty much the goal of cold conditioning.
All right.
And then from this tank, it goes right into the kegs. There's no filtration aside from our watermelon lager. It's the only beer we actually filter in any way because we have to filter the watermelon slurry out of it, or the kegs will, if they're kept warm, will actually re-ferment because of all the sugars.
Because of the sugar in the watermelon.
So if those kegs are stored at room temperature, which for the most part they are at distributors, we have no control over how they're kept at distributors, which is unfortunate. But so we have to filter all the watermelon out by the time it goes into the kegs. If not, we'll have grenades sitting in our beer distributors.
Boom.
Yeah. Out of conditioning our beer, carbonating our beer. In the past, we'd have to kind of, we would the cold conditioning process was easy, but the actual carbonation we had to do by taste and by hand with a 50-pound CO2 tank and a carb stone, and we would just taste the beer periodically as we were bubbling in CO2 to see if it was getting to the desired level. With the tank managers, we can actually go in and say tank 1, I can go in and actually set my carbonation level, my headspace pressure and how many volumes of CO2 I'd like to have dissolved in it, and then the tank manager will do that for me. So whenever it's done, whenever it says it's reached that final headspace pressure and volumes dissolved, we'll take a Zamnagel, which is an apparatus that actually measures the size of the bubbles that are present in, the amount of bubbles that are in there, and uses a PSI reading, and then we cross-reference that PSI reading with temperature in our Zamnagel book, and it gives us a fairly accurate idea of how many volumes of CO2 that are dissolved in our beer. And for almost all of our beers, barring I think our oatmeal stout, we do about 2.7 to 2.72 volumes dissolved of CO2. And the only reason we do less on the oatmeal stout is because we do a 75% CO2, 25% nitrogen mix to go to very creamy mouthfeel. So we keep it at 2.5, so when we dissolve the nitrogen into it, it actually has, for lack of a better term, room to actually dissolve into the beer whenever we're pouring it. So it's not quite like Guinness where you have to do the special pour because it's not straight nitrogen, but with that blended nitrogen and CO2, you get the creaminess and the mouthfeel of a nitro stout with the ease of pouring of a CO2 carbonate.
So you can tap it like a regular pint, but you don't have to worry about pulling.
We don't have to have the special tap system. We don't have to have. We have a nitrogen blend that we use to actually push the beer out of the keg. So as it sits on that nitrogen, the nitrogen will be dissolved into the beer, and when we pour, we just pour straight into the glass, and then it just settles up. So pretty much like Guinness in that respect, but a lot easier to pour.
So this is giving more like a automation meets handcraft.
Yes.
Same thing.
This is actually the only automated process in the entire brewing process we have here.
The rest is hand.
Everything else is pretty much done by hand, from actually mashing the grains in, transferring it over, and actual kegging. I mean, we don't have machines that do that for us.
Excellent. That's good. That's the way it should be. So.
So the beer's on tap right now. We have our 4 flagships, and I'll go through them for you. Our first flagship is our Best Blonde, which is our German Kolsch. It's a German style wheat ale. It uses a hybrid yeast that actually ferments like an ale yeast, top fermenting warm. But the yeast actually produces lager-like characteristics in the beer. So it has the mouthfeel of an ale, the taste of an ale, but the finish and kind of texture of a lager. So it's more or less one of our summer beers, but we make it year-round. It's as one of our best sellers, actually. And the Old Jail Ale, which is another one of our flagships, is our English Brown Ale. It's roasty, toasty, a lot of caramel toffee flavors in it. It's probably one of our best-selling session beers we make. It's only 4.8% ABV, and it's just a really easy drinking brown ale. I mean, that's kind of the only way I can put it. We've engineered it to be kind of our session beer.
Completely sessionable, easy.
And then we have our Ludwig's Revenge, which is probably coincidentally one of the most interesting beers we make. It's a hybrid between a German Schwarzbier, which is a black lager, and then a German Rauchbier, which is a Bamberg-style smoked beer. Mm-hmm. So it has the color and flavor profile of the Schwarzbier with the roasted chocolate, the roasted coffee, kind of the lightness on the palate, even though it's jet black. But then finishes with almost like a mesquite smoked bacon flavor due to the smoked malt we use in it, which actually comes from Bamberg, Germany, and is smoked in meat smokehouses. And in Germany, their national animal is the pig, so they do a lot of pork. Hence the kind of smoked bacon, smoked pork taste you get in beer.
There you go. And
then our last flagship is Daddy Fat Sacks, which is our English IPA. And what differentiates an English IPA from an American IPA is actually malt body. and kind of hop character as well, but primarily malt body. And American IPAs tend to focus on how much hop flavor can we squeeze into a beer and still make it drinkable. So most of your American IPAs tend to hover around the 90 to 99, even a little over 100 IBU range, whereas your English IPAs tend to have a little bit of a sweeter, more robust malt body, which knocks down that overall bitterness to a more agreeable level of anywhere between 45 to 70 IBUs. Our Daddy Fat Sacks actually rings in right at 69 IBUs, which makes it a very agreeable, very easy to drink IPA, and I always jokingly call it our session IPA, even though it's 7.5% ABV. And then our specialty beers we have on tap right now are our Gobbler Lager is actually our Oktoberfest, but since we made 2 batches of it this year, and with the 1 batch we've aged for 5 months, we actually still have it on tap, which is great for me, great for everybody here, because it's one of our favorite beers we make. But it's one of our most malty beers we make. We use 9 different specialty malts in it, ranging from chocolate malt, caramel Munich malts, kiln malts, kiln amber malts, which give it just a really nice, subtly roasted character, a very rich caramel toffee flavors, some subtle spiciness from German hops in it, but more often than not, it just has a really big, really rich malt character, which is characteristic of fest beer. German fest beer like Spaten, Oktoberfest, Paulaner Oktoberfest has a very similar taste to them, with a little bit more body, a little bit more mouthfeel to them, because of the range of malts we use in it. And then the Lay Down Stay Down is our highest alcohol by volume beer, ringing in at 9% ABV, and it's our Belgian dark strong ale. And it does live up to its name. It drinks about as easy as the Best Blonde does, but has the alcohol punch of drinking 2 Best Blondes at once, essentially. And it has a lot of the dark fruit, spicy flavors associated with it, a little bit of a bready, almost doughy-like body. It's a very chewy beer. And then just finishes with a very mild warming sensation. It doesn't really allude to how much alcohol is actually in the beer, and in that respect, it makes it quite dangerous. And then our final beer on tap right now is our Grateful Red Scottish Ale, and that's a beer that we've been toying with now for probably close to 2 to 3 years, changing the recipe around as we go. And this year I think we hit the nail on the head, because it has just a wonderful, nutty, roasty, caramel toffee taste to it, but finishes with an earthy, kind of spicy smoke character from a peat smoked malt we use in it. And we're actually going to enter this beer into the Amber Waves Amber Beer competition and see how it does. And this is the first year we've brewed it that it actually has a completely clear red color to it. In years past it had been cloudy, murky, almost to the point of being brown, and this is the first year we actually managed to make the beer red in color and have all the characteristics of a Scotch ale. So that's pretty much all the beers we have on tap now. We do make a number of other seasonals and specialties, like I was saying with the Mind Your P's and Q's, the Truly Honest Ale, our Love It's Watermelon Lager. All of those actually are made late spring, early summer, and then in the fall and winter time we actually have our Ichabod Crane's Midnight Ride Pumpkin Ale, which is a Belgian style, probably strong ale, I would say golden strong, and we age on real pumpkin meat to get that nice pumpkin taste. So we add pumpkin spices such as nutmeg, coriander, and a little bit of cinnamon to give it that overall pumpkin pie taste. And in the wintertime, alongside of Lay Down Stay Down, we also have our cranberry ale we make as well. So we have quite a large lineup of beers, but we only unfortunately have enough taps for about 8 or 9 of them at any given time. I'd love to see some of our seasonals and specialties become year-round, like some year-round specialties. Like Mind Your P's and Q's, we only do a 10-barrel batch of it, and it's my favorite beer we make. We used to make it exclusively for Philly Beer Week, but now we do it as a seasonal and specialty because there was actually a large local following for it in Chambersburg. So we make it, and in about 3 weeks it's sold out. It's one of our fastest selling beers we make, next to the Watermelon Lager. The Watermelon Lager is the beer we make the most of, and it's a Munich Helles that we age on 250 pounds of actual watermelon meat to give it a very nice, subtle, almost earthy, like watermelon taste. But last summer we made 6 batches of it, 6 25-barrel batches of it, and every batch sold out.
Okay, good.
So that's just kind of a brief rundown of all of our beers we actually have on tap or that we produce as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yep.